Ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct privilege to introduce you to the Honourable Anita Anand, Canada's Minister of National Defence. Before entering politics in the 2019 election, Minister Anand was a law professor at the University of Toronto, Canada's leading university, where she held the J.R. Kimber Chair in Investor Protection Corporate Governance. She's the author of a number of books on corporate law and has taught at Yale, at Queen's, and at the University of Western Ontario. She represents Oakville, which is just outside Toronto, but she was born and raised right here in Nova Scotia. It's been 1 year since Minister Anand assumed the role of Minister of Defence, and in that short period of time, she has provided the Department of National Defence with leadership, strong leadership on international security issues and much needed internal reform. It is my privilege to invite Minister Anand to the podium. Minister.
I was hoping you would bring that up here. Good afternoon. What a wonderful afternoon it is to be here all together again at the Halifax International Security Forum. General Eyre, Deputy Minister Matthews, NATO counterparts, ministers who have come from far and wide, distinguished delegates, friends, allies, partners. Welcome to Canada. Welcome to Halifax. I acknowledge that we are gathered on the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. Today and every day, we reaffirm our commitment to meaningful reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. Je suis vraiment ravie d'être de retour au Forum, une fois de plus. How many of you have been to this forum before? It's just wonderful to see people coming back and back again. Why? Because this conference, this venue, and the discussions that we will have offer an unparalleled opportunity for the world's democracies to connect with decision makers, military leaders, and industry partners from around the world. Thank you, Peter. Thank you to you and your entire team for co-hosting such a fantastic event year after year. Back in the good old days, when I was a prof at the University of Toronto, I organized many conferences. And I know that tomorrow or Sunday, you will start the process of planning for next year. You will gather ideas, and you will begin the 365 process of making sure we can gather again. So I thank you for your work year after year. On a more personal note, as Peter implied, we are just 90, well, I think 60 minutes now with the new and improved 101 from where I was born and where I grew up in Kemptville, Nova Scotia. So if you have time after the forum is over, be sure to head north to Kemptville and tell them Anita sent you. Nova Scotia is a special place, and not just for me, but for our entire country. It's full of talented, smart people who love this country and who stand with our armed forces. Earlier today, I announced that Canada is proposing the Halifax Regional Municipality to host the North American Regional Office of DIANA, NATO's Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic. The objective of DIANA is to facilitate cooperation between military operators and the alliance's best and brightest startups, scientific researchers, technology companies to solve critical allied defense and security problems. I thank Admiral Bauer for being with us on the jetty this morning and for your remarks. With more than 300 entrepreneurial science and technology startups, Canadian Forces Base Halifax, Defense Research and Development Canada, and 7 universities, the Regional Municipality of Halifax is a natural host for DIANA. Now, a lot has changed since last year's forum, and I am loath to state the obvious. But I will say that our conversations this weekend take on a new sense of urgency. No matter how you look at it, our world is growing darker. From the ashes of the Second World War emerged a rules-based international order which has underpinned global security and prosperity for nearly 80 years. And that order is based on a set of shared values and principles meant to govern the international order, including respect for national sovereignty and the rule of law. But now emboldened authoritarian regimes are openly challenging the international order in pursuit of their own reckless agenda. Que ce soit la guerre illégale et injustifiée menée par la Russie en Ukraine ou le comportement de plus en plus assuré de la Chine, les acteurs non étatiques se montrent plus audacieux. Pendant ce temps, l'émergence rapide de technologies comme l'intelligence artificielle et la robotique donne lieu à de nouveaux défis, des nouveaux risques et de nouveaux dilemmes. De plus, les changements climatiques continuent de perturber la vie au pays et à l'étranger. These threats are all real, and our world has come to an inflection point. Collectively, we face two paths. Do we let the hard-fought gains of the past 80 years slip away and return to a world where might makes right? Or do liberal democracies stand together to preserve the longest stretch of progress, cooperation, and freedom the world has ever known? Path number 2 will require a strong and united effort of like-minded nations. Call it multilateralism for the 21st century. Canada, for its part, is firmly on the side of liberal democracy and international order. The number of Ukrainian flags flying in solidarity in communities across this country makes that abundantly clear, and I hope those of you visiting from abroad get a chance to see these flags. They are on porches, they are flying from vehicles, they are on lapels, and we are all collectively committed to the stability, the sovereignty, and the security of Ukraine. Aujourd'hui, je discuterai donc de la nécessité de réaffirmer la coopération et les institutions multilatérales afin de surmonter les problèmes de sécurité modernes.
Modern security issues. I will also be emphasizing the role, the frontline role being played by Canada in the Ukraine, in North America, and the Indo-Pacific region.
When Vladimir Putin further invaded Ukraine on February 24th, he made a number of false assumptions. One assumption was that the Russian army would easily override the Ukrainians. He was wrong. The spirit and determination of the Ukrainian people and President Zelensky continue to inspire us all. Ukraine's armed forces are driven, disciplined, and make no mistake, better trained, and they are winning. Another assumption was that the international community would simply look away. Again, Putin misjudged. Russia's full-scale and unprovoked invasion has only strengthened NATO's resolve and unity and renewed its raison d'être. C'est ce que je ressens durant chaque appel.
That is what I feel during each phone call and each meeting that I have with my NATO counterparts.
Minister of Defense, to our forum for the first time. Welcome. For our part, Canada stands firmly with Ukraine. We have provided Ukraine with M777 howitzers, artillery ammunition, and anti-tank weapons, dozens of high-resolution drone cameras, and 39 armored combat support vehicles built right here in Canada. At Wednesday's meeting, this week, Wednesday's meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, I announced a further $34 million in military aid for Canada to Ukraine, including satellite services, drone cameras, winter gear to keep the Ukrainian troops warm in the winter months. And earlier this week, we announced that we have allocated another $500 million for additional military aid for Ukraine, bringing our total commitment of military aid for Ukraine to over $1 billion since this February. Et notre industrie.
And our industry as well is quite significant because it does produce high-quality equipment, and in the future we will continue to work with our partners in the industry to give Ukraine the aid that it needs.
We are also training new Ukrainian recruits in the United Kingdom. And as announced this week, this training will continue through the end of 2023 in England. And as I recently announced, Canadian Armed Forces combat engineers are deploying to Poland to train Ukrainian sappers. And in fact, since 2015, the Canadian Armed Forces have trained more than 34,000 Ukrainian military personnel under Operation Unifier. The Communications Security Establishment is working with our Five Eyes partners to share valuable intelligence and cyber threat information with key partners in Ukraine while supporting efforts to counter Russian disinformation. And Canada is taking a leading role in NATO's eastern flank by leading the multinational Enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group in Latvia. I was in Kyiv at the end of January, about 3 weeks before the invasion began, and I met with my good friend and colleague, Minister Resnikov, and other Ukrainian officials. And I also met with Ukrainian citizens. And when they saw the maple leaf on the shoulder of the uniforms of our soldiers, they stopped us on the street. And they told us how much it meant to have Canada's support, not just in 2022, but since 2015 under Operation Unifier. And I told them what I will tell you now, that Canada will continue to stand with the Ukrainian people for however long it takes, period. Now, while Canada is working in lockstep with its partners on the security crisis in Europe, we are also closely working with the United States to bolster our continental defenses. We must invest in the Arctic, which is quickly becoming a place of economic and geopolitical interest for countries like Russia and China. And that is why in June I announced Canada's plan to invest $38.6 billion over 20 years to modernize our NORAD capabilities. And this marks the most significant upgrade to Canada's NORAD capabilities in nearly 4 decades. Our investment is focused in 5 key areas: enhancing surveillance and modern threat detection, improving command and control, strengthening air defense capabilities, modernizing infrastructure, and research and development. Since I made the announcement in June, we've already begun to work with our U.S. partners to strengthen our integrated surveillance and decision-making capabilities. Our air forces are working together to refine plans to establish cutting-edge network of over-the-horizon radar sites in Canada and in the U.S. These sites will significantly improve our ability to detect incoming threats at longer ranges, including over the Arctic. And we are also looking at how we can upgrade infrastructure at 4 of our north operating locations, while also upgrading our future fighter infrastructure and quick reaction alert capabilities at military bases across the country. These upgrades will extend the range and capacity of NORAD's defenses, especially in the north, while ensuring that our infrastructure is more resilient to climate change. And our defense scientists have been working with U.S. counterparts to identify initial priorities for R&D, including how hypersonics, quantum technology, and space-based capabilities will shape new and emerging threats and how we can respond to them.
The capacity modernization in Canada within NORAD is a key task, which will continue over the next years. At each step, we will be resolute in working closely with our U.S. partners, as well as with the northern communities, as well as the indigenous people from coast to coast.
For more than 60 years, the bottom line is that Canada and the United States have stood shoulder to shoulder to protect our shared continent against evolving air and missile threats, a relationship based on mutual trust, shared values, and a deep friendship. And I thank the co-delegation for coming year after year in that spirit of friendship and partnership. Thank you. Together, we will continue to meet the threats of today and tomorrow. Now, turning to the Indo-Pacific. The fact is that the Indo-Pacific is at the center of a global shift. It is the fastest growing economic region of the world, responsible for almost 2/3 of global growth over the last several years. Every single issue that will impact global security in the coming decades runs through the Indo-Pacific, from economic growth to democracy, from climate change to human rights, including the rights of women and girls. The region is home to China, a global power that is becoming increasingly assertive as it advances interests and values that continue, frankly, to depart from ours. And Canada will always speak openly when it comes to upholding the values that underpin the rules-based international order. And our approach is shaped by a realistic and a clear-eyed assessment of China's assertive behavior. We will challenge China when we ought to. We will cooperate with China when we must. And we will continue to deepen our economic ties with our partners in the region. We will always engage where we must, including on Ukraine and North Korea. Let me be clear. North Korea's missile testing is unacceptable for Japan, for the Republic of Korea, and for all of us in the region. Canada condemns this reckless behavior in the strongest possible terms. Canada
will also continue to work with its partners to ensure respect and progress for the rules and standards that are helping all states and not just the major powers. As a Pacific nation, Canada is already deeply involved in the region.
Encourage responsible engagement in the Indo-Pacific, our armed forces are participating in multilateral training exercises with our allies through Operation Projection. And after transiting through the international waters of the Taiwan Strait again this year with our U.S. allies, our frigates have monitored UN Security Council sanctions against North Korea through Operation Neon. We are committed to deepening our engagement in the region over the coming decade, and that is why we will soon be releasing our comprehensive Indo-Pacific strategy. Our strategy will position Canada as a leader in promoting peace and security in the region. And from a defense perspective, we will increase our military presence and enhance our defense and security relationships with partners and allies in the region. We are adding a new national economic security lens on foreign investments in Canada, including in the critical minerals sector, as highlighted recently by Ministers Champagne and Wilkinson. In short, our soon-to-be-released Indo-Pacific strategy will showcase the best that Canada has to offer while making us a force for positive change in the region and in the world. To do all of this, Canada needs a military that can meet tomorrow's challenges. Nous priorisons le
We will be prioritizing recruitment and retention and the reconstitution of our armed forces, and we have put in place measures to achieve these goals. We will continue to promote cultural change, which is very important and necessary within our armed forces. And I thank Lieutenant General Carignan for their work.
done reviewing and updating our defense policy, Strong, Secure, Engaged. The global security environment has changed so much since it was first released in 2017, and we need to change it. We need to update it. And this defense policy update will ensure that Canada is ready to navigate an increasingly complex and dangerous world. And I thank those of you who are here today for your input on this defense policy update. Now I will wrap up. I'm a student of history. I remember devouring history books during my university studies and reading almost every biography and autobiography that my mother painfully purchased at bookstores right here in Halifax so that we could all read them at home. To me, today's global security environment is eerily reminiscent of 1914. We see power struggles between nations, the rise of new technology, disruption, and upheaval. And we all know what happened next. Today's outcome can be different, but it will take work. It will take a renewed commitment to bilateral and multilateral cooperation among allies and like-minded democratic nations. At the end of the Cold War, I was in my undergrad at the time, American scholar Francis Fukuyama mused about what he called the end of history. He wrote about the final victory of liberal democracy. And I think we can all agree that his prediction was premature. But that is not a reason to give up hope. Last month, Fukuyama wrote, "Liberal democracy will not make a comeback unless people are willing to struggle on its behalf." Quite simply, we cannot give up the fight. We cannot take liberal democracy for granted. And as we work together to defend the values that we hold dear, Canada is here as your friend, your ally, and your partner. And we are fully committed to this noble mission. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. I'm looking forward to our discussion.